Welcome back to Unbound Faith.
Yeah.
Our journey through the Bible chapter by chapter.
Yes.
And today,
Genesis 16.
Genesis chapter 16. Oh, my
Right.
goodness.
Buckle up.
This one it's a doozy.
It is. Yeah.
But before we get started, like we always do,
Mm-hmm.
let's just kind of set the scene and remind everyone where we are.
Yeah. So we're picking up in the story of Abram and Sarai,
Right.
and they've been promised, this incredible blessing from God descendants that are going to outnumber the stars.
Huge. Yeah,
Yeah.
nations coming from them.
Exactly. But there's a problem.
Yeah.
Sarai is barren.
She cannot have children.
Didn't have children.
And in their culture at that time,
Right.
that was like
It was a big deal.
a huge deal.
Yeah, it was a sign of shame.
Totally. Yeah. And
It's not
so,
a sign that maybe you weren't in God's favor.
right. Like
Yeah.
maybe you did something wrong.
Right.
And so they're wrestling with this. And Sarai's like,
She's like, I got a plan.
I have a solution.
I know what we're going to do.
This is what we're going to do.
This servant, her name is Hagar.
Hagar. She's
Yeah.
an Egyptian woman.
Okay, so culturally was this...
Yeah, this was not unusual.
Okay.
At the time, in that culture, surrogacy was practiced.
Okay.
It wasn't seen as this strange, unusual thing.
So this wasn't like a totally out there idea?
No, this was a solution that would have made sense to people at the time.
So she's like, you take Hagar,
Yes.
you sleep with her,
Have a child with her.
she'll have your baby, and then we'll call it a day.
And then we will have fulfilled God's promise. in a
Right.
sense.
Like, I mean, can you imagine like
Wow.
the emotional turmoil
Oh, the layers here.
of this
Well, no.
of this situation?
How many?
For one thing, Hagar goes from being like a servant
Right.
to now carrying the heir
The child.
of this powerful couple.
Yeah.
Abram is like,
Yeah, he's the one God made the covenant with.
right.
He's the one God's going to bless.
So she's carrying like the chosen child in a sense.
It's a huge responsibility.
And then you have Sarai, who's like,
Yeah, I gave you this idea,
right,
but I'm watching you get pregnant, and I'm not.
exactly. And that's where it starts to unravel.
So what happens?
Well, the text actually tells us that Hagar starts to like look down on Sarai.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like she's got this sense of pride or maybe even arrogance because she's the one who's pregnant
Wow.
and Sarai is not.
That's got to be hard
Oh, I can't even imagine.
to watch that. Like,
Yeah.
I gave you this gift,
I gave you this.
but now you're like lording it over me.
Yeah, and Sarai gets angry.
Of course she does.
I mean, rightfully so.
She starts mistreating Hagar,
Starts to mistreat her.
and it gets so bad that Hagar's like,
She flees.
I am out of here.
She runs away into the wilderness,
Oh, my goodness.
pregnant and alone.
Alone and pregnant and scared.
Afraid.
I mean, where's she going to go? What is she going to do?
What's going to happen to this baby?
And this is where it gets really interesting,
Yeah, this is where the story takes the start.
because she comes to a spring in the desert,
Right.
and she meets an angel.
An angel of the Lord appears to her.
And this is no ordinary angel visit,
I
right?
don't know, this is a divine encounter.
What happens?
Well, the angel speaks to Hagar,
Okay.
and first of all, acknowledges her situation, recognizes her pain, her fear.
So God sees her,
Right.
even in her distress, even when she's run away.
Absolutely, even when she feels alone and abandoned.
Wow. Okay, so what does he say?
He tells her to go back to Abram and Sarai.
Oh, really?
Yeah, to submit to Sarai.
Okay.
But he also gives her this incredible promise.
Okay.
He says that she will have a son,
Okay.
and she is to name him Ishmael,
Ishmael.
which means God hears. And he says that Ishmael will be the father of a great nation.
Okay, so he's going to have tons of descendants.
He's going to be super fruitful.
Okay, but then there's this kind of like,
There's this little caveat.
this little detail that's kind of ominous.
It's a little foreshadowing.
What does it say?
So the angel says that Ishmael will be a wild donkey of a man.
A wild donkey of a man.
His hand will be against everyone,
Against everyone.
and everyone's hand against him.
So he's going to be like an outsider.
He's going to be a fighter,
A little bit of a rebel.
a restless spirit.
Yeah, so like on the one hand, God's blessing.
Blessing, protection, descendants.
But on the other hand, this tension, this conflict.
Right, and it really foreshadows a lot of the conflict that we see play out later in the biblical narrative.
And think about it. God chose to reveal himself to Hagar,
Right.
a woman,
A servant,
an
and
Egyptian.
someone who was considered an outsider in that culture.
What does that tell us about who God notices?
I mean, it shows that God sees the marginalized, the
Yeah.
overlooked, the ones that society might push aside.
And this isn't just a one-time thing, right?
No, throughout the Bible, we see God consistently showing up for the underdog.
The widow, the orphan, the foreigner.
Exactly. It's a beautiful reminder that God's compassion doesn't play favorites.
It really does. And then Hagar does something really remarkable.
What's that?
She gives God a name.
Yes.
She calls him El Roy.
El
He's
Roy.
God who sees me.
Powerful name.
And it's the first time in the Bible that anyone gives God a name.
It comes from this woman in this incredibly vulnerable situation.
Right. She's alone. She's pregnant. She's afraid. But she recognizes that God sees her.
And not just sees her in like a passing glance kind of way,
Yeah.
but truly sees her, knows her heart, her struggles, her fears.
And that's a truth that speaks to us today.
Absolutely.
You know, no matter what we're going through, no matter how alone we feel,
God sees us.
God sees us, He knows us, He hears us.
And He cares.
And that's the blessing of unbound faith for you this week.
May you know the deep comfort of being seen by God.
Until next time,
Shalom.
shalom.